the Foss journal. What I've done so far is that I've taken the loose sections out. The first two sections were loose, so I've removed them, and I also removed the masking tape that was on here. There was masking tape on these 3 locations here, and it wrapped around to the back. So here, here, and here. The tape residue did leave a shadow, like a darker area, but at least the tape is gone. So the next step is to repair the separated pages. This is the second section, and it's already been repaired. And what I did is, it's called guarding. Each of these folios has been repaired with a piece of Japanese paper along the spine, so along there. And I'm going to show you a bunch of this. I'm going to do this to a bunch of to many of the folios that we have from both this book and that book, so you'll see that in action. So there was a lot of debris in the gutter where the sewing went, and I've cleaned some of that up. So this section, second section, is ready to go back on. This book is numbered, so I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
But usually when it's not numbered, I'll number them with pencil.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question. So there were before pictures taken, and the pages are numbered, so I know which way they go back together. For this first section, this is the section that was the most damaged. This is the inner folio, so 90, 91. You can see the Japanese paper in the raking light if you look real close. I don't know if you get that on you.
Yeah, actually.
The very first thing I do is I go through my Japanese paper, and I have like a whole box of it over here. These are my full half sheets. They come in different tones, different thicknesses, and then I have my boxes of scraps, which I have divided into thick, medium, and thin. So the first thing I do is I'm choosing a Japanese paper that matches in color, hue, tone, the color of the paper I'm working with. And it's never perfect, so, and I'll usually do a couple of, and that's something I've already done, is I take a couple of test samples where I pick the ones I think are the best and I paste them up, and then I wait for them to dry, and then I decide which is the one I'm going to use. So I've already done that part of it. And I'm using a couple of different papers for this one, because this particular book is really yellowed on the first few pages, and as you get into the book, it's whiter. But this section, having been handled the most, has a yellow tone to it. This is a cutting mat. I always work on the cutting mat, self-healing cutting mat. A couple things to show you here. For some reason, this was stapled to the cover, and there are these missing areas, and then also there were pieces like these that were stapled to the cover. So I took those off the cover, and I tried to figure out where they go back on the page, and so I fit this piece here. I was able to figure out where it went because of the text. See the pencil writing on it. I've put a piece of Japanese paper on the front side, as I'm trying to fill some of these missing areas, because the whole point of all this work is to stabilize the object so that it can be handled without damaging it further. And so any area that's missing like this is an area that can catch and tear and become worsen. So I have already started out by, as I said earlier, I started out by doing the front. This is the paper that I used in the front, this one here. So it's thin, and this one here is a little thicker. So what I decided to do is to use this on one side and this on the other. So this is the piece that I'll be using in the back. And what I do is I put it on a light table. I don't always need a light table. It just sort of depends on the color of the paper. This is a Japanese water pen, and I'm just going to use this to trace shape that I'm going to paste in there. And I'm looking at a few things. I'm looking at where the paper has the fewest flaws, and once I put it where I want, I just do a little test there to get the water going. And sometimes I'm just going to have to work and not talk because it's hard to do both those things at the same time. Okay. So this is not an exact science, it's just it's more of I'm using my eyes to find the shape, the general shape. And then I let it dry a little bit while I move the light table. This Japanese paper, the reason that a lot of conservators like using it is that it's very long fibered. And so this is a good place. I don't know if you got a good photo of how long the fibers are. And so that makes for a really strong repair. But you don't want these really long fibers they're a little bit unsightly, so you do a little trimming of the very longest ones. Just kind of makes for a neater repair. So I just go around with scissors and cut the very, very long ones off. The paste, which is wheat starch paste, this is what I use. So I'm making a sandwich of blotter and this rime, so the paper doesn't stick to the blotter, and then it'll have another layer of rime and blotter after I do the repair. And I have enough contrast here with my cutting mat that I don't have to use the light table anymore. I'm going to paste up my repair. So paste is the preferred repair material because it is reversible. You know, like if somebody came along and decided they didn't like my repair, they can take it out, they can get rid of it by using a little moisture. And so this is what I use for almost all my repairs, is Japanese paper and paste. And sometimes I match the thickness of the paper, but on this I'm going to just do these two layers and see how it is after it's dry, and then decide from there. So I'm going to make the sandwich here. I'm going to put the Polytex paper, or Polytex material, piece of blotter underneath.
But when you were first getting started, did you kind of experiment with a lot of different kinds of papers and you discovered this was the best, or is it kind of just a standard that they use in the profession? Or
so I have gotten to know Japanese papers over the years because I've been doing this for 30 years. But Japanese papers is the standard in the profession, and they're not just used for paper, but it's used for all kinds of repairs. They even use it on I don't know, on sculpture, on, I was just reading an article on this, how Japanese paper has multiple uses because it's strong, it's pliable, you can work it, you can layer it. I put this under a board with a little bit of weight. I'll let that dry. So I'm often going back and forth like this with when I'm working. I'm doing I'm doing one repair and letting it dry, and while that dries, I work on something else. Yeah, the water pen just creates the shape, and the paper tears along that water line. I think this is just a paintbrush. I know. It's just,
I got you.
It's just a paintbrush.
You're using it with just water.
I'm using it for this, but yeah, this is a tool. I'm really not sure. I think it was just designed for like sumi painting. No, it's not special. Not special for conservation.
Yeah, nice
there's a lot of tools that conservators have picked up because it suits a particular task. And I still use it sometimes. As I have an old. This is an old Schaefer ink pen that never had ink in it, and I use this if I want a more precise line. On this book, and I'm working on both books at the same time because, as I said, while one is drying, I'm working on something else. So let me just show you where I am on this one. This book is going to require a lot more work because almost every single section needs sewing. I believe it has between 22 and 24 sections, and each of them needs some kind of repair. The first thing I did is take apart the sewing, which was completely broken. Here's what it looks like. I've retained the cords. I'm hoping to be able to reuse the cords, and these are all the different sections. Some of them are quite, this will require piecing these together. For right now, I'm just going to focus on the guarding and how I do that, because it's the same procedure that I used on the Foss journal. These are the ones that I haven't completed this because this one is going to be attached to this first one, but I have completed these other three. And these have all been guarded and are ready to sew. So these are the ones that are done, and then these are in progress right over here. And I was working on these just before you came, and I'm going to show you how they get pieced together. So we're kind of going backwards here. This is the step 2, and when I'm done showing you these, I'll go back to step 1. On these, the paper that I used, it's also a Japanese paper, but it's made in the United States at the University of Iowa. And it's kind of cool because it comes already with its own line, so I don't have to draw the line like I did on the last one. And they come in thick line, medium line, and then this very thin line.
And so these are made specifically for exactly the type of work you're doing. Yeah.
These are made for conservation work, and they're just called Japanese Tearguard paper. Most Japanese paper that's used for conservation is made with kozo, which is the mulberry plant, and there are 2 other plant-making fibers, but the kozo is the most popular one. And on this book, depending on the condition of the fold, I'm either using the very thin, the medium, or the thick. This one here, if you look closely, it's the very thin. Here we go. I'm just trimming off the 2 ends, and this piece, this particular folio, a folio is a folded page, is ready to go. So 51, 52, and I find the fold, and then I go back afterwards and repair the edge tears. And so any place there's an edge tear that might catch, I'll repair that. But first I'm going through and doing just the piecing together. So again, these have all been guarded, and now I'm going through and I am trimming off the ends. And some of these just have 1 piece of Japanese paper, and some have 2. So this is one that has 2. It had the wide one on the back, and then it has the narrower one in the middle, because this one actually had places where it was completely separated. There are considerations as to thickness, so I'm trying to use as little of the Japanese paper. I'm trying not to do double whenever possible, but sometimes you need that extra piece in the middle for the strength. So as I'm piecing these together, I am looking at the pagination to make sure I'm getting them in the right order. And because I still need to do the edge tears like these right here, this is stage 2. Like the first stack I showed you, I've already gone through and done all the edge tears.
Okay.
So a folio is a folded piece of paper, and a section is 2 or 3 folios together. In this particular book, the sections are 2 folios. Yeah. If you could just stretch those and put them there, then they're in order for the next stack. So this is the, okay, so here we have a piece, this is the inside folio of a section, and I did repair this one little tear down here at the bottom. I'll take that off. Okay.
Does paper quality of what you're repairing affect? Like I noticed some things are really, really brittle.
Yeah.
That's
Paper quality is important. The paper, this paper is in fairly good condition. It's not too brittle. The paper quality in both of these books is, I would say, good. You can remove the mold, but you can never ever get rid of the spores. Oh. So you can get rid of mold either by drying it, and then you can people do put some kind of chemicals on it, attempt to keep it from coming back. But the main thing with mold is that once you put a piece of paper or anything organic that's had mold on it, the spores are there and it'll regrow. So the important thing is to keep it out of the conditions
that allow mold, that
allowed it to grow in the first place. Yeah. Heat plus humidity is are the conditions that create mold. And here in the Northwest, we don't have quite the amount of heat that other parts of the country have, but and I'm guessing there's a lot of different kinds of molds. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, so. But I do know that the mold will come back, and it's really important to store things, objects, in conditions that are cool and dry. Okay, so here we have just put these 3 sections together. As I'm putting them back together, there's a tear there that I'm going to work on repairing. Let's see how this one is. There's a small tear here, and that looks pretty good. That looks good there. So this one just has this tear here, and I'll come back to these. So as I said, here's the section. It's 2 folios, and they're stuck together. So I gently pull them apart because I want them actually to open flat. Okay, so the first thing I do is pull them apart. And this is one that probably will just need a medium-sized piece. I go along the spine edge on both sides to make sure there's no chunks of glue, because there was a lot of the glue on this was animal glue, and it had dried. And so I run my finger along it to make sure that there's no chunks there, because it'll make it hard to refold later. So this one is ready to go, and then I'm going to just check on this one. This one here, this is the first section in the book I've come to where there's actually a page that might not need any guarding except right at the very bottom here. Looking at it from the back, it looks like here's a loose piece of paper that we can repaste Yeah, so this one we're just going to repair at the top and bottom. Here is the medium-sized weight that we're going to use. I tear that apart, go along the edge. I'm working on the mat because it shows me where the missing areas are, if there are any. And I always do it on the outside. I always do the guard repair on the outside. Sometimes I'll just add a little bit of paste just to flatten any areas that are lifting up. The paste I'm using is wheat starch paste. I cook it. I store it in a cool place because it does have a shelf life. And I'm a bit of a paste geek. I have a particular way of making the paste and storing it, and it's a really high quality paste.
And how do you store it?
I store it in an opaque container, in water, and usually outside in the winter, and in a refrigerator in the summer, because it has to stay cool or it'll go bad quickly. Usually one batch of paste usually can last me up to a month, and I always like to have some on hand. So So this is where those pieces that I showed you earlier, this is where they were. I've gotten them this far. And right here where there's a crack, I'm going to go ahead and put a little small piece there. Okay. And it doesn't need a lot of weight on it, just a little bit.
And how long do you leave it weighted?
I don't know, maybe 20 minutes.
Okay.
Again, this is Polytex. It's just a fabric textile that keeps the paper from sticking to the blotter that I'm using to help dry the repair. So this is one where I'm just re-adhering the paper to itself. And this is one where I'm just going to repair this area down here. And just a small piece of the narrow one will be enough for this. So, and because I'm trying to put these back in the, I want these to go back into the original case, and I'm hoping to use those original threads. I am trying to minimize the bulk and only add Japanese paper where I feel that it's needed for stability. So, and it's very typical that the front sections of a book will have had the most wear on them. So right here, this is paper that came off of the other side of the other folio.
Okay.
And it's not needed, and it's actually a little bit in the way, so I'm just gonna peel those off. So there's another little tear right there, and because that's a sewing station, so I put a little paste underneath because it's actually going to attach itself to the other side of the paper, and then I'm just putting this on top for a little extra support.
Okay.
And so because this is a sewing station, it's a place where it's going to need that reinforcement. Try to remove any of the old glue, and there's a piece here and a piece here. It's a small thing, but a lot of those pieces could add up to extra bulk, which I'm always trying to reduce. Here you have you only have a tear down at the bottom, but because this is the outer folio, I'm going to go ahead and put an entire long strip.
And so the outer folio kind of has more pressure on it, is that?
It's the one that's going to be exposed to adhesive later, to
Okay.
the glue that holds the book together.
Okay.
So the books are sewn, but they're also glued.
Okay, so it just needs more support.
And this one will probably I'll probably do like a mixture when I re-glue the spine after the book is sewn. It'll probably be a mixture of, it'll be mostly paste, but with a little bit of PVA, which is a flexible modern glue. Animal hide glue was the glue that was used in the in the 1800s. That particular glue discolors and dries hard, so I don't use animal glue, although it is a reversible water soluble glue. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with it other than it just tends to harden and dry. A lot of books fail because the animal glue dries. So I'm also going to, right here, there's a bit of a fold, and I'm just going to put a little paste on both sides of that fold, and that will allow it. The paste also hardens a little bit, and so that'll give that a little stiffness there. So I've prepared that. But the more water you have, the longer it takes to dry a repair, and also introducing moisture can make the paper cockle. So, all right. So first I just kind of tap it into place. Oops, it just moved on me. Didn't quite. Time to clean my fingers too. Sometimes when I have too much paste on my fingers, the Japanese paper will stick to my finger.
Oh, yeah.
So once I have it laid down where I want it, then I put some of the Hollytex over it, and then I rub it down. And sometimes if it's been a little while, like if I'm not like right there because the paper moved on me, sometimes I'll go back over the area with more paste.
It really does just disappear and dissolve right in there.
Yeah, and it really once it's dry and you trim off the ends, you can hardly see that it's there. I actually really like this process. I find it really almost meditative.
Yeah.
And satisfying. I was an art history major in college, and I had a really wonderful advisor senior year, and he took all of us majors and spent the whole semester discussing different kinds of jobs that would be maybe of interest. And so he took us to tour the conservation labs at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Oh, nice.
And I was really charmed.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. But I ended up getting into books because that's what I found an internship in. And it actually suits me. A lot of art conservation is very scientific oriented, but I really like the craft aspect of bookbinding. I just love the work. I love actually doing the work.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a couple of things that happen. First of all, not just is the paper, the Japanese paper, adhering to the paper of the folio, but it's also pressing down the loose fibers of this paper that were kind of sticking up. And then this one here is in really good shape, so I'm just going to do a little repair at the bottom. Right down here, and there's a tear right here. That looks pretty good though, the rest of it. And usually when I'm working on a book, the closer I get to the middle, the less repair there is on the spine, and then as I get back to the back of the book, then again it's more repair. So here we're going to do two. We're going to do this little one right here. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting some paste on both sides of the fibers, laying them flat. Also on that. So for the spine repair, I'm just using some of this thicker Japanese paper. I mean, it's the thinnest line, but it's a thicker paper. But for this one here, I'm going to use a piece of very thin paper so that we can read through the text.
Mm-hmm.
And I make the piece fairly wide just because I want to give I don't want to put any stress on that one place. I want to spread the area of stress across a greater area. As it dries, it'll become more invisible. We're done with those, and now let's go back to the Foss journal. Okay, so we're back with the Foss journal pages, and this is the repair that we made earlier. So just to kind of review where we were, I did a thin layer on the outside. I reattached this piece that was stuck to the cover right there, and then I laid down a layer of thicker Japanese paper, and you'll see that when I cut off this the edge that extends beyond the paper, once you remove that, the repair blends in more. So see, I'm going to trim it just a little more. There's a piece that's sticking out right there. Even though this paper is not as thick as this, it has enough strength to hold it together, and really I'm not trying to make this disappear. I'm just trying to stabilize it so that it didn't fall apart. So as far as I'm concerned, that's done. This is not the inner folio, and so I am not going to do any reinforcing here because this is actually really in pretty good shape. And so the only other thing I'm going to do is I am going to reinforce these areas where there was where there's missing areas here, and I'm going to just use some of the very thin Japanese paper, which is this one here. So up here we have an area where there were two staples, and this one here you can see how that's lifted away. So I'm going to put a little paste on that, and I'm going to put it back in place. This one isn't really lifted, so I'm going to leave that one as it is. I'm just going to maybe put a little paste on it, but that's it. This really thin Japanese paper almost disappears, so instead of using my fingers where it'll just completely disappear on me, I'm using the knife to lay it down. I'm rubbing through the holly text because otherwise it would stick to the bone folder. And that looks pretty good. Actually, you know, I'm going to use the light table, so I'm going to take a break here. I mean, it's interesting. You can see that there's some things about the repair that I can only see without the light, which is that this is, the paper was wrinkled and I actually nudged it back into place. But the light table helps me see where the missing area is. I'm not making a fill. I'm just gonna take one piece that I'm gonna lay over this whole area just to reinforce it. Let's see, turn that off for a sec. So it's larger than the area, and as I said, it's transparent, so you can read the ink through it. Oops. So you can't even see it with the light on, but you can see the shadow where the moisture is here, and it'll dry. So this piece is done and ready for going back together into the section. Oh, this is kind of cool. You can see, you know, with the light table, you can see the watermark.
Oh yeah.
And it says linen ledger, so that's the kind of paper that was used for this journal. And then once this is dry, I may add another layer on the inside, but right now we want to put it under some blotter to wait. We were talking earlier about paste, and one of the ways that I keep my paste fresh is that I keep it in a container, and I only take out what I'm going to use. So this paste that is here is just what I'm going to use today. The way I look at it, there are cosmetic repairs and structural repairs. And so if it's a structural repair, and that usually means it's going to need some kind of re-sewing at the spine. Sometimes the spine just needs reinforcement, like the paper is okay, all the pages are together, the glue has dried. So there's some instances where all you need to do is re-glue or repaste the spine. And that is a structural repair. But a structural repair where you are doing guarding, which is what I've just shown you, means that the sections and the folios came out, you know, and we're going to re-sew. So re-sewing is the next step. These are the two sections that I pulled out because they were, this one was loose and this one had already come apart. You know, it really depends on the client, the museum, the individual, and what they want to do with this. Fred just wanted this book to be able to be in one piece. So what I'm going to do at the next step, which I'm not ready to do, is I'm going to re-sew these two sections to the book. And here is what the original sewing looks like. Let's see, we'll go to the middle of the third section. There you can see the sewing in the book, and so I will be connecting to this sewing, and I haven't quite figured out what the pattern is that I'm going to use yet, but I will be re-sewing these sections with a similar linen thread, so of a similar weight, so it'll probably be this or something like this. This one I think is a little too thin, see. So I'll be using linen thread and a needle, and then this section, the first section, is going to have a hinge, a Japanese paper hinge, and it'll probably be either one thick piece or it'll be multi-layered. It's going to attach to this. So instead of seeing this brown of the board, you'll have a paper that's going to blend in. It'll go underneath this, and that is how the board is going to attach. You know, Fred and I discussed this, and we decided that we would not try to cover up the rest of the book. So we're not going to reback the book. Rebacking is what is called when you add either new leather or cloth or paper underneath the original spine. And that was a decision that Fred and I came to together, because we're not trying to make this look like new. The other thing that's going to happen is these loose pieces of leather will be readhered to the board so that there aren't little pieces sticking out. This will stay. You know, I'm not sure what this was from. Right here, I want to show you, here's where those staples were that had, for some reason, the pages were stapled to here, and that's where those little fragments that you saw in my repair came from. This is coming apart. This one, although it's funky, it's kind of part of its history, and we didn't want to remove that. I mean, this is part of the history too. Those are the hard decisions, like what to leave and what to remove. But this is very stiff, and the Japanese paper has more flexibility. So we'll see. This piece is more flexible than this one here.